Yeah, hi, my name's Samantha Phelan. I'm here on behalf of myself and my family and my friends.
Thank you.
In terms of what I present today, it's hard, isn't it, to sort of define it as because I come as a punter rather than anything else. But I think it's really important because in reading the draft report, what I find really missing is everything that I've heard being said in these consultation processes. So whilst they're captured in a way, okay, so there is acknowledgement that people of the Northern Territory, you know, in the majority aren't accepting of this industry, that is what you've heard. While they're captured in little moments of sentences, what there seems to be in the document is a way forward for this industry, okay? And that if you were asked to give, okay, we have an impasse here, we have a public who doesn't want this industry, how do you give us a way forward for this industry? I think that is what this document is in a nutshell, and it's good in that regard. But I don't know that that is what this consultation and what we have all been saying over and over again, I don't think that's reflected in here. And I think you need to be really careful in that because it is very easy to marginalise Lock the Gate, and there is an active campaign now to do that. Not that I am a member of Lock the Gate, but I obviously know them, discuss things with them. But I think it's very easy to begin to marginalise that if nowhere in that document there is the cautionary tale of what we are all saying and that is spelt out. So through it there is an assumption of integrity about what the gas companies are saying and what the gas companies are putting forward. And there isn't the same acknowledgement of absolutely step by step, if we do not go down this incredibly narrow path of good, robust regulation, what the consequences of that could be at every point in time. And I think there's been enough presentations to actually make that really clear. And I think as we carry it forward as a document, it will become increasingly important that the reasons behind these recommendations are spelt out in the report. So if we choose to ignore recommendation 8.1, these are the direct consequences of that. This is why this is a recommendation. Now, forgive me if some of it is expanded. I've only read the draft report. I haven't read the extended version, so it may well be that there is more spelled out.
When you say you've only read the draft, you mean...
the summary.
You haven't read that?
I haven't read the big fat one.
Right, okay.
I've read the abbreviated version.
Okay.
So there may be
a lot more explanation in there as to why.
Okay, and is there cautionary tales really spelt out in that? And I do apologise, it's just
No,
I'm
it's
busy.
fine. No, it's a massive report. The fact that anyone has read it from start to finish, I think is commendable. I'll come back to you, and again, I don't want to interrupt your presentation.
Yeah, okay, but the cautionary tales I think are really important. Why we are all at this table, why we all keep turning up as mothers, as fathers, as family members, is because we don't believe it. You know, we don't believe those gas companies, and we actually, in some way, from what I've read in this report, or from the report that I have read, is that voice of the Territory is actually denied. So we live here and we know that our government does not have the capacity to implement good regulation. We know that it cannot create a good regulatory regime. We know that it does not monitor sites adequately. We know all that, and that knowledge, and it is knowledge, so you can, all the science in the world, that is still knowledge. And there is a bit of a romantic picture of the Territory portrayed in this that I find a little bit jarring compared to what certainly I know a lot of people have been saying. You know, that we have clear running streams and we have magpie geese and these clear streams that run from the hills. The reality is that the MacArthur River, the Daly River, the Katherine River, the Edith River, possibly now the Roper River, but nobody would know, are all contaminated rivers. And they're contaminated because our government has not regulated and monitored these mining companies. So to paint a glossy picture of how wonderful and pristine our environment is, it is an unreality. And the people who have come to this table have been saying that. You know, we have don't eat limits on fish in all of those, with the exception of the Roper, on all of those rivers. You are restricted in the amount of fish you should eat because they are poisoned. And they're poisoned because risk mitigation was thought to have been put in place, and the best risk mitigation of the time was put in place, but it didn't work. So that is my fear, that we now have 120 recommendations of risk mitigation that won't work, and we will have more poisoned waterways. Okay, I just would be wary of the romantic notion of this pristine environment, because actually from where I sit, it's an environment that is being gradually and quite rapidly eroded by this sort of practice. I'd also just mention too the railway story. Like, it was a railway carriage carting chemical that derailed on the Edith River and dropped tonnes and tonnes and tonnes of copper sulphate into that river. So the idea of rail in the wet season is also problematic, and certainly isn't the be-all and end-all. And it also, I think the report needs to acknowledge the vulnerability of the NT to these companies, okay? Both because it's a poor state, because of its massive geography, and because it's largely an ESL area, English as a second language area, in the areas of operation. And I think there is an inherent vulnerability in that really needs to be recognised within these recommendations. I'd also just caution on the Indigenous voice. I mean, in this, I'm yet to see, and I may be wrong, but I'm yet to see, in monitoring as I have the video whenever I can of these consultations, I'm yet to see one Indigenous person that doesn't represent a political or organisational body or a consultant on behalf of Indigenous people that really supports fracking. The Indigenous voices I've seen stand up at these sorts of things, or at the public forums, overwhelmingly don't seem supportive. And I just wonder where that voice is in the document, because it's fine for NLC or CLC or various consultants who are being paid significant amounts to speak on behalf of Indigenous people, but if the people that are coming to these meetings and standing up and saying no, if that voice isn't heard, then I think we've got trouble. And I don't think it's fair. There's also a recommendation that there's translation of all information given to Indigenous people, and I just wonder, do we post-date that information? Like, none of that has been happening, so that's a way forward, but it doesn't address all the consultation that's gone before, and that consultation is still being used both in contract form and in theory. So while it's a great idea, and it should have happened at the get-go, it hasn't, and we're 7-8 years down that journey now. The NT way that is mentioned, I mean, the NT way is probably to some extent what's got us into this trouble. You know, the NT way of she'll be right has led us down the path of she'll be right. And I think a diversion from the NT way and a much more sophisticated approach to an industry that has the potential that this industry has to damage the environment must really be considered. The NT way is also not today, not tomorrow. That's what NT stands for, not this month. Yeah. And to some extent, I wonder where that lies in terms of the development and regulation of this industry. So a lot of stuff in this report talks about this all needs to be done before production, okay? Before production. Now, before production, we've already cut up vast tracts of land. We've already chosen the land. We've already drawn up our grids. We've already done all our sacred site surveys. We've already put down a well, test well every 5K. We've done a whole heap of stuff before production. So I would contend that a lot of these recommendations need to happen before exploration, because the negative impact of them exists whether we go to production or not. If we're clearing tracks like that photo of a mungie, of land right the way through this country, and we aren't required to be doing anything much in a regulated capacity, and the industry folds, then we're left with the consequences of that. So I think we actually need a timeline. I heard on the radio yesterday afternoon, they've appointed these 3 economic wonders who are going to lead us forth into great economics with offshore gas. So they've employed 3. The Territory Government has announced 3 economic leaders to engage with local business. Okay, it basically is chapter 13 of your report, okay, which worried me because whilst on the radio they talked about we should not just be a gas exporter for offshore gas. What I heard in that was we are developing the mechanism to answer chapter 13, okay? And given that the ducks are beginning to line up, okay, I think in terms of this industry going ahead, your report finishing, the moratorium being lifted, and full-scale exploration beginning, and I think this is the trajectory that we are on politically, that we need a timeline and we need it really quickly. And it needs tick a box. Have we done this before we can go to that? So do we have 10 years of fire data for these places? I don't know. Do we? Who's the fire person? Sorry? 10 years of fire data that's required. Do we have that on these properties? Yeah, we do. Yeah, I just read that and thought, wow, do we have that sort of stuff for everywhere?
For all of Northern Australia.
Yeah, great. Okay. But there really needs to be a checklist of what regulation needs to be done before, or what development of legislation needs to happen before we can take the next step. Like, we need an ordered approach from this point forward, and I think this is your inquiry is probably the way to do that, because, well, who else does?
I think we can make the recommendations. It'll be up to the government to implement those recommendations.
Sure, but at the moment,
if it chooses to lift the moratorium.
Totally. Yeah. But at the moment, what we have is blocked recommendations where nothing is hinged on the next. Do you see what I mean? Like, when does the SREBA come in, and how long does the SREBA operate for? SREBA, whatever we're calling it. Do you know what I mean? The research model. How long does that operate before we allow exploration to continue or production to continue? It needs to be really specific, because as a mum and as a person in this community, this is the last document I will have to be able to say, are you doing it right or not? You know, is this really what the intent of this inquiry was or not? So the next writing journey, I think, needs to really be looking at it from the other side of the fence, not from this is an industry that has integrity and has given us all this information and we will do it, but really try and just change your position in the seat and go, okay, I'm a worried mother in Katherine who has a good brain and foresees all of these problems. Does this give her the next reason to go to the Chief Minister and say, no, that isn't what the inquiry said, you know? And that's what, as a punter, I need from this document now. And a timeline would be really helpful for that, you know, because it enables us to see what should be happening inside both government and industry. Okay. Right through the report, I had to sort of smile because I was out with a pen and a highlighter. And right through the report, I've just written in the margin, who does this? Who does this? Who does this? Because there's a lot of grey areas about whose responsibility within those recommendations that is. So all the who does this? Human health risk assessments. Okay, who does them? Groundwater modelling. Who does them in every instance? Is it always SREBA, or when it goes to, oh, we just need to cut across that stream and we don't think that's going to cause too much trouble and the gas company said it isn't, is that okay? Or are all groundwater modelling and all surface water modelling based on an independent body? Who does the seismic testing? Who does the suitability for re-injection? Who does hydrogeological investigations? At what point does Shreeba drop out and gas company come in? Monitoring for drawdown, it says that is a gas company's role. Ongoing vulnerable species monitoring, gas companies are doing it. Well integrity testing, who does it? Okay, and given the lack of faith that so many people have in the integrity of these companies, I think that needs to be really spelt out, roles and responsibilities of each, because there aren't too many of us who really want the fox in charge of the hen house. Okay, I think it is a really dangerous place to go to, and I think if we're going down this path of industry, at every point we need an independent assessor. I don't think we should move forward at all with gas companies doing their own monitoring. And this is the catch, that there is no capacity in the territory to do it. You know, I don't know how you get around that, and I don't know how you address that in your report, but I don't believe there is the money, the capacity, even if there's the will, to actually independently manage these giants, you know, and that is where you get into dangerous territory, I think. The fox in the hen house was the other. I had the who does this and then the fox in the hen house. And I assume you know what I mean by that. Just in terms of gas companies, IDing critical habitats is mentioned, that they'll be doing that, okay? That they'll be doing the HRRAs, you know, the health risk assessments, and that they'll be funding and designing information about the programs. And that one blew me away, that they are responsible for funding and designing information that is then taken to community. I didn't understand the rationale for that, and I would be very cautious of it. Having been to every show in the Northern Territory and talked to gas companies for the last 5 years, every show I can get to, every town I'm in, but had discussions with them and watched that evolution of that story, okay, and the gradual doling out of fact as the population has become more aware, you know, that the level of knowledge they are prepared to disclose every year increases because they realise they are now dealing with an educated population. They're answers that they could have given me 7 years ago but chose not to, okay? So if they are in charge of developing and funding the development of all the information that is disseminated in communities about what they're going to be doing, I reckon it can't help but be biased. And I think that probably needs to be addressed. In the document too, I mean, I sat here last session and listened to Origin Energy, and in that, one of their non-negotiables was well spacing. Okay, they wouldn't negotiate a minimum well spacing anywhere. In the document I read, which will be the document that a lot of people as a go-to document rather than that weighty creature, you know, so I think that the draft summary probably needs to reflect the balanced opinion that possibly the thicker document does. But that sort of stuff isn't reflected. So the feeling you get when reading it is that here we have companies that are advising us. They're advising us pretty openly and transparently, that we think they should probably be the advisors on this stuff, and that the views that that there isn't the conflict that there is. Okay, so non-negotiation of a minimum well spacing to me is a massive red flag about what the potential for a landscape is. But that's not noted, you know, there's just your recommendation of a 2K minimum without a really clear statement of gas companies don't want that. You might be up for a bit of a fight on that. You know, I think there's a subtlety to this conversation that's happened that might have dropped out, and I get why. I mean, you could do a book that thick. But I think Can you understand from where I sit?
I do understand what you're saying. And look, I think there are places where we do. This is why we have a draft report. This is why you release draft reports, so that you can get this feedback, and we're grateful for it. And there's certainly places where I think we need to go back and clarify and reconsider. But in fairness to us, I do think that it is. I mean, this is a problem with executive summaries in a sense. It is just a snapshot, and you try and do your best without making something the executive summary as big as the actual draft, the actual main report. It is a packaged document. You do need to read this. You need to read it. You need to read it with the interim. You need to read it with the background and issues paper as well. They all sit together.
Okay.
And I realise that's a huge reading task, but certainly at the very least, the draft report itself, it does provide a lot more explanation of the risks identified by you.
Yep.
We set out our own risks, and then we put those out. We got more risks back, and that was then what we went away and assessed.
Yep. Okay. And I apologise for not reading it before I come in and criticise. But
please do not in any way apologise. It's a massive document, and that's why tonight, from 5 to 8, there'll be quite a lengthy, long presentation on the content of this report, because we don't expect people to have read it. We just don't.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of those, hopefully some questions will be answered. It may well be that more are raised, and that's fine. That's what the discussion after the presentation will be for.
Yep. Okay. The reuse of flowback water as well. I mean, it's sitting with Origin there. It sounded really dodgy. Like, it just was so grey what they were actually saying with the reuse, like the reusable flowback water. And I just wonder, where's that actually happened? How often's it happened? And how really, do they really intend to do that? Because,
Save some money.
To some extent it does, but not if it doesn't run through their machines easily. Not if there's
it does happen. It is happening, and it's highly likely that it will happen.
Yeah.
Because it saves some money.
Yeah. All right. I think, and also make good clauses and compensations. I mean, a make good clause, once the horse is bolted, you still don't have a horse. And I think wherever we have make good clauses and compensations, it probably needs a really big fat description of, what these should look like. And what events you see a make good clause would come into, I mean, less than a metre drop in water, okay. What do they really look like? And what happens? What's the process if somebody refuses a land access agreement, refuses to sign? What happens then?
Again, the report
goes in there. Okay,
I'll
do that then.
There would be you can't enter onto the land unless you have one.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have one, then you go off to court.
Mm-hmm. And the court's never found in favour of a landowner?
They don't get to court, by and large. They don't. It does, again, the evidence indicates that it does have the desired and intended effect of shifting power to the landowner.
Mm-hmm.
It has a tendency to make the gas companies try that much harder to reach agreement.
Mm.
That's been the experience in Queensland and elsewhere.
Yep. All right.
Where they're mandatory.
So that's me. Okay. But I just, if we can lose the romance and add the really what Territorians are really concerned about. And, it's easy for organisations, and there's a real risk in organisational stuff, I think, we all do it. When you're at work, that's the framework you're working in without hopping to the other side of the fence and seeing how this document will be used as in a way forward, for people like us who want to make sure that if this happens, we know what should be happening before it happens.
I understand that.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of the questions that I had have actually been answered in the exchanges that we've had. But yes, Dr. Anderson.
Yeah, so just to clarify that the industry opposition to well spacing and the reasons for it are in the main report. So
Thank you.
And perhaps I could add that the industry reiterated its opposition to prescribe minimum spacing in the Darwin hearings.
Yeah.
So it's still the industry view. But to be fair to industry, it wasn't presented to us in a it's not negotiable, can't happen. It was presented in the case of...
Here it was. It was presented as these are our 3 points of non-negotiation.
Yeah, but at
So-
least for the hearings here, it was more a case of we much prefer there weren't a mandated minimum, but it's something we could live with.
Yeah.
Yes, Professor Hart.
Just a comment on use of flowback water. As the Chair says, it's in their interests. To answer your question though, how much, it's really variable. If you look at what's happening in the States, the best I've seen is 80%, but it goes down to 5%. It depends on the particular shale situation. So I think the companies aren't being cute. I think they're actually saying, yes, we'll do it, and they've been saying, well, there's a number of numbers in various submissions. Most of them are sitting around about the 30%, but it's been, I can't remember, someone actually said higher than that, much higher than that. I don't know. I think there's a way to go. I think to me, there'll be no question that if moratorium's lifted, they will definitely reuse. It's absolutely in their interests because they don't have to take as much good quality water. So that's in their interests. How much it'll be, I think, really depends on what the actual plays are like, the shale deposits are like.
And have we got a record of, like a mandated record of quantity of flowback water? Is there a mandated record of that in any recommendation? I'm yet to see it, of
No,
volume.
it's not mandated because the problem is that this early exploration stage, we're not quite sure what percentage of water might flow back. For example, from the Munji well, I think only about 20 to 30% of the water that went down actually
But
came
of the
back up.
quantity that is received, just is there someone external tracking that water? Is there a compulsory, like, if they pull back, however many megalitres, is that then watched over time?
Yeah.
It is.
There is.
Absolutely. Well,
Is there any recommendation that happens?
Well, it's part of the whole government responsibility. Now, you might not agree that that's a good thing, but we have made recommendations in Chapter 14 that tries to separate the government responsibilities so that a lot of that authorisation, environmental authorisations and so forth, and the tracking of various components would be done by a more independent group.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thanks for your
Thank
hard
you.
work.
And again, you have, as you've pointed out before, you've come on a number of occasions to address the panel and the inquiry, and each time you have raised very thoughtful points, which I know, speaking for all of us, I'm seeing all the nodding heads, we will go away and think about again because I think some of the points you raised do require some further thinking on our part and further exploration and consideration, particularly in relation to the drafting. So thank you for that, and thank you again for engaging with the inquiry. We do appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.